Hey, deserving listeners, Kalani and Asuelu, I'm going to react. Let's watch.
Now, I need to know how to talk to Lisa. Sometimes I think in Samoan, try to translate in English. So when I say in English, it's not make sense.
Different.
It's not make sense. And also I swear to Kalani.
Okay, so I commend him for taking responsibility for some of this stuff, but I don't think he's conceptualizing it accurately. But it makes sense given that he seems to have an immature mindset when it comes to these sorts of things. But he's taking responsibility for some things. He's saying, there's a language barrier that's an issue, which, seems like that's likely a factor. And I swore to Lisa, I swore to Kalani, I shouldn't have said those things. I revealed our Samoan ideas about American women, and I said some things I shouldn't have said. But that's not really what's happening in my view. What's happening is he just has a mindset of when push comes to shove, he doesn't have to deal with it. Again, the way a 13-year-old thinks. The way a 13-year-old, and not all 13-year-olds, by the way, but it's normal for a 13-year-old to think, look, push comes to shove, it's not my responsibility. I'm a child. And push comes to shove, if I'm not feeling it, then I'm not doing it. And that's the luxury of being a child. You can just release responsibility if you want to, but the downside is you don't have a license, you don't have a car, you don't have freedom. And so, there's pros and cons to being 13. And his mindset is when push comes to shove, I'm just not going to deal with it because I just don't want to. And if I don't feel it, if I'm not feeling it, I don't want to do it, I'm just not going to do it. Or if people are trying to give me advice and I don't like what I'm hearing, I'm just going to say, I reject your advice and I'm right. Again, the way that a child thinks. So he's saying, I made a mistake, I swore, but again, it's coming across like the perspective of a child. He sees it as, I did something wrong. Now, there's a possibility, from the beginning I've been saying, that he actually is competent, but he acts incompetent as a way of sucking people into being competent for him. That's what he's comfortable in the same way that Kalani is comfortable in the over position. He's comfortable in the under position. There's a possibility, very strong one, that he is absolutely capable of everything that we think he is. And now, for me, I'm starting to have this narrative that he is inherently incapable. Is he actually inherently incapable? Or is he seducing all of us, in the family mainly, but also us, the viewers, into believing that, so we actually don't expect much from him, so we don't force him to do responsibilities so that he can remain in the child position. That's where he's comfortable. He doesn't mind sacrificing respect from others. He's like, fine, I'm not going to get any respect from others, but I won't have to take on responsibilities because I believe if I take on responsibilities, I'm going to screw it up. So it's better this way. I'd rather have it this way. I will socialize everyone into thinking I am incompetent, and then they'll never ask me to do anything, and that'll be okay. So is he seducing all of us to believe that, or is he actually being that way? And I have to admit that as the episodes have gone by, in the beginning, I just assumed he was competent and that he was only coming across as incompetent because he has that tendency. And over time, I'm starting to think, wait, maybe he is incompetent. Now, is that because he's just very good at getting other people to believe that, or is that actually true? I'll never know because I'd have to assess him over. This is a very complicated question you'd have to assess, and even if I had a lot of time to assess him, I still wouldn't know for sure. There's just no way to know for sure. It's not like you take a blood test and you can just measure something. But anyway, so I commend him for apologizing, but I'm not confident that he has a grasp on what's wrong so that he can fix it.
Make a really bad, because it's my son's birthday and I'm his dad, and now I'm doing really bad things.
But you have to think, because there's always consequences for every little thing we do. Some consequences are really...
So I wish the dad hadn't interrupted him there. I think it's normal that the dad did, but I would have liked to hear him go down that road a little further, Asuelu. He's saying, yeah, I screwed things up. I wasn't there for my son. I did really bad things. And I would have loved to have heard him expand why. Why did you do you understand why? What's going on? What was the emotion that was happening for you? What was your state of mind? You're saying you made a mistake. Do you really believe that? Why did you get there? And this is the thing on the show that's really frustrating to me, is that when people make mistakes, they usually don't take responsibility, or they often don't. But even when they do take responsibility, there's no exploration as to why did I do that? I wonder why I made that mistake. There's usually just a lot of apologies, just a statement of apology. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Please forgive me. And no exploration of, well, how did that happen? Because if you do that exploration, you might not figure it out. But if you do it enough, you'll eventually have a conceptualization, and then you know what to do to change it so you don't do it again. So does Asuelu know why he did it in the first place? Because if he knows why, then he can try to work on it so he doesn't do it again. If he's just going to apologize and move on with his life, then he's bound to repeat this again in all likelihood. I don't know that, but that's usually what happens. So maybe Asuelu will get into that. Let's hope.
Really bad. People can get hurt. You know what I mean? Lonnie told me you never did apologize, or
I don't know how to talk to Kalani about that. I don't know how to do that.
but again, here we are.
Okay, so that's an interesting statement that he's saying. The dad saying, are you going to apologize to Kalani? And Asuelu says, I don't know how to talk to Kalani. I don't know how to do that. You know, that's actually possibly true, that he believes that. He's just like, I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know what's happening. It's possible. And I hope that the dad says, okay, well, here's what I learned from my life of how to apologize. Here's what I learned from maybe he needs a little bit of mentorship along those lines. As a therapist, that's what I would do. If I had a client like him and he was like, I don't know what to do, I'd say, okay, well, I'm just going to throw out what I might do. Because one of the functions of therapy is actually mentorship. It's not a very frequent function, but it can be a function, meaning that for a lot of us, we might grow up in situations where we've never seen healthy behavior from other people, particularly adults, and particularly people close to us. And it's somewhat of a tall order to ask someone to be healthy when they've never seen it before. It's like asking someone to drive a spaceship without ever watching anyone drive a spaceship, right? You're just like, okay, get into the cockpit and drive it. You're just like, where do you put your hand? I don't even know what to do here. So part of helping people sometimes as a therapist is just to role model something. So I might say, well, yeah, how do you talk to someone? Well, I mean, here's this option. I might say this, I might say that. Depends if I'm feeling this. And sometimes that can help someone, a client, particularly if someone is exhibiting a childish, because that was the other thing, is when I would talk to teenagers, they might particularly have a hard time finding examples, role models to follow. And so I might provide, at least in that moment, a little bit of a role so they can look at it and say, that sounds okay. And some of you have actually emailed or commented below along these lines. I will role play something. I'll say, well, here's what I might say. And people will say, they'll watch these videos and they'll say, I've never heard anyone say it like that before. That makes a lot of sense. And when you hear it, you might say, well, how come I've never heard anyone talk like that before? Or how come that never occurred to me to say it like that? It just seems so obvious. You know, I have clients and students that will say this to me. I'll role play something. But, you know, I've been a therapist and a trainee, an educator for 25 years. And so I have a lot of practice. And I'll put something out there and people will say, how do you just come up with that so fast? And I'll say, well, I've been doing this for 20. You do anything for 25 years, you eventually get good at it, hopefully. And practice makes perfect. So sometimes you just have to keep at it. Anyway, point is that I'm really worried about Asuelu. This is good that he's apologizing, but I don't know if he's learned anything other than just to fall on his own sword.
Taking the bag and walk away from you is not a smart idea. I do know I really was so wrong when I say that woman somewhere is better than you. and I'm so sorry.
Okay, so he started off okay. I think it's one of 100 steps that he has to follow here to demonstrate, at least to me, such that I won't worry. He doesn't have to do anything for my sake, but I do worry about this family. And so anyway, in terms of what would reassure me, he's done one thing, which is good, but he needs 99 more. But he says, okay, I'm sorry for comparing you to Samoan women. I'm sorry for putting down American women. Okay. So that's, it's a good start, but that is not the main issue here. Let's see if he can get at that.
Thank you for admitting that. That's progress. But it doesn't mean anything if you don't do anything. That is one of the things that irritates me so much is a lot of the time you'll apologize and then you'll just keep doing the same things.
Right. So she is saying that something that I was suspecting, that he does what other people do on the show. We've seen Michael of Angela and Michael. Michael will do this. Other people on the show have done similar things where they'll make mistakes and they'll come crawling back and they'll say, I'm sorry, I did that thing. I'll never do it again. Please take me back. Can we go back to the way things were? And then time passes and they do it all over again. And this is because the individual doing the apology is not investigating why they did it in the first place. And this is becoming a frequent refrain of mine on this show while I'm reacting is, okay, you can apologize. That's great. But that's just 1 out of 10 things you need to do. In fact, there are many different factors. I can't remember off the top of my head. Actually, there's a whole episode I've done about apologizing. I've actually talked about it a number of times, but there's a number of elements to effective apologizing. Now, what is an effective apology? An effective apology, according to research, is when the other person feels pretty done with the issue, meaning the Kalanis of the world are like, okay, you know what? I'll put it aside because that apology was comprehensive and I'm convinced. The other element that often isn't identified in the research because it's harder to measure is that the person apologizing is setting themselves up for success in the future, meaning that they've learned from their mistakes. So the different elements of an apology, and I'm going to try to rattle them off the top of my head, are apologizing, which is to say I'm sorry, is to acknowledge the way you impacted the other person. So for Asuelu, it would say, it makes total sense that you were hurt by me insulting you and all American women. Another element would be to talk a little bit more about the unreasonableness, to say something like, it's totally unreasonable that I was putting down you. That doesn't make any sense. But you have to elaborate on that a little bit. And Asuelu didn't do that. He could elaborate by saying, you work so hard with the housework, with the kids, and I just need to acknowledge that. I was actually saying the opposite. I was saying you were lazy, but it's actually completely wrong. You do a lot of work and you really do a lot with the kids, and I actually don't do a lot. So that would have helped, right, if he could have said something like that. Another element that you have to have in an apology is to not excuse it, but to explain it. It's very important that you explain as you are apologizing. You don't excuse it. You don't say, well, the only reason why I said all those mean things to you is because that's what I was taught. In my culture, they taught us that American women are terrible. And so that's why I said it. That in that tone is an excuse. You're just saying, not my responsibility. But if you explain it, even if you had the same factor, you could be like, yeah, so I grew up in a culture where we said this, this, and this. And so when I came to the United States, it really kind of confused me. It doesn't excuse what I said to you because it was mean and it came from a place of anger and frustration for me. But I was kind of brainwashed by my childhood into believing a certain thing about American women. So he could say something like that. He could also do well by identifying what issues he was going through at the time. He could say, like, I was really sad about not going to Samoa. I don't deal with those kinds of things very well. I have a pattern of going down a downward spiral. I don't know how to get out of it. I'm going to dedicate. So this is another element to the apology. I'm going to dedicate myself to trying to change that. I can't guarantee anything because I've been doing this my whole life, but I'm going to try. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to when I start to feel that way again, because I can kind of tell when I'm getting into that mood, I'm going to try to take a walk around the block. I'm going to go talk with my therapist. I'm going to hug you. I'm going to say that, here is my plan the next time I am going down a road that will lead to the same behavior because I keep doing this over and over again. So there's other elements to an apology, but that's how you apologize. One, because the success of that is the other person is like, wow, Asuelu is not only sorry, but he also has been investigating this, and he has a plan, and he understands what I went through, and he told me what factors led up to it, which I could see, but he's not making an excuse. He's taking full responsibility. He's very sorry for it, and I have confidence that he cares enough to apologize. He cares enough to investigate. He cares enough to make a plan so this won't happen again. He's in the driver's seat. I don't need to worry about it. He'll figure it out if it happens again. I'm guessing he'll just return to this apology and he'll continue to work on this because I know he knows how to fix this. So not only to the Kalanis of the world is that an effective apology, but it's also an effective apology for Asuelu, because if he goes through all those steps and he verbalizes it to the other person, it locks it in, because when you verbalize things, it really helps you to retain it, and you're much less likely to commit the problem in the future and thus get your needs met, which is he wants this relationship to work out. But that's not what we see in the show. What we see in the show is, I'm sorry I did that. I shouldn't have done it. I lost my temper. Let's move on. It's insufficient. It's a step in the right direction. It's better than saying nothing, but it is a far cry from a working solution to the problem. Let's see what he says.
I mean, it's not only me, it happened to you.
You're apologizing right now, so we're talking about you. We're not
Okay.
talking about me and what I do. You made an issue and we're trying to fix it, so we're talking about you right now.
Okay. I will show you. I'm not gonna do that again.
So that's the other thing that they always say is, I'm sorry, and I'm going to show you. Just trust me. I'm never going to do it again. So this is what we call white knuckling it. Like if you're driving a car and you're nervous and you're just white knuckling the steering wheel, you're just like, I'm just going to really concentrate. And in this sort of arena, it never works. To just say, I'm going to exert willpower over my issues, over my tendencies, even though it's never worked in the past, it's definitely going to work in the future. Willpower doesn't work that way. In fact, willpower as we understand it is non-existent. The way people think about willpower, that's like, well, I'm going to go on a diet, or I'm going to exercise more, or I'm drinking too much. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm just going to use my willpower to stop myself from doing that. It depends on what we mean by willpower, but 9 times out of 10, maybe more often, it doesn't work. And then we feel like we're a failure, we're weak, we're procrastinators, we don't know what we're doing. And because we have this idea in our society that you just need more willpower, you just need to, resolve. This is why New Year's resolutions, according to research, never work out, because willpower isn't really a thing. We need a system in place. We need a system. It's sort of be like if your favorite sports team, baseball or basketball, football, soccer, whatever, if they lost a game, and instead of practicing, instead of having a plan, they just said, you know what, we're just going to use willpower to win the next game. We all understand that doesn't work, right? You have to practice. You have to study the next team. You have to study their weaknesses and their strengths. You have to make a plan. That's the complete opposite of willpower. That's planning ahead. That's understanding. It's investigating. It's taking the time to think about things. It's having some kind of a plan of attack, right? And we see time and time again, people on the show, they'll apologize and then they'll say, trust me, I'm not going to do it again. At some point, the Kalanis of the world will say, you said that how many times? So let's see what Kalani says.
I learned from the past and we just move forward. Can I give you a hug?
So it's a plus. That's what I'm always saying is if you're in the middle of a fight or an apology and you hug your spouse or your friend or her family member, that's a good thing. Reach out, touch someone's hand. It's good. So he's doing something that's good. Now, when I criticize him in terms of his very ineffectual apology that I imagine will not actually change anything in his future behavior, I'm not saying he's doing, a lot of people think that he's doing it on purpose. A lot of people think a lot of people on the show are doing it on purpose. And maybe he is. We have no way of knowing. But that's not typically the reason why this sort of thing happens. People say, oh, he's gaslighting, he's playing a game. That's, possible, but it's not usually what's happening. What's usually is happening is he doesn't understand himself. And he doesn't have a model. No one's ever shown him how to investigate himself. No one's ever shown him how to take the time and say, you know what? Okay, I made this mistake. Let's figure out. Let's go to therapy. Maybe he's never seen that before, or he's too afraid to look inward because he's afraid of what he's going to see. That's usually why people are avoidant of those things. Because if there was an easy track towards investigating himself, and he had confidence in that, and he had support, and he had a way of doing it, then he'd probably take it. People usually take roads that are effective if they have them available, or if they know that they're available. And so there's a good possibility he just doesn't even know it's available. So I don't know. I can't predict the future, but I suspect this is the last time we're going to see this sort of behavior from him. And his assertion that he has learned from the past and he's never going to do it again is false. But we'll find out.
I need to know that you're not going to just be throwing me under the bus, or any little argument we have, you're just going to leave.
I will promise you, I will not throw you the bus again and forever. And I want you to be my bus driver, and I will promise you that.
Okay, so that's interesting. So he doesn't know the phrase, which is fine. This is, is a second language, but she is saying, I need you to okay, we're going to go visit your family, but I need you to promise me you're not going to throw me under the bus. And he says, okay, I'm not going to throw you under the bus. In fact, I want you to be the driver of my bus. That's interesting, given my hypothesis that he's comfortable in the incompetent child position, and she's comfortable in the parent position over him. So he's not saying, let's both drive the bus. He's saying, no, I want you to drive the bus. But does he really want her to drive the bus? And that's the conundrum of a 13-year-old. So I've been hypothesizing that if, everyone on this show, when they're under stress, will regress to a certain age. And I think for him, he regresses to when he's 13. And when you're 13, you definitely want your parents to drive the bus because you don't want to take responsibility for yourself. You don't want to get a job. You don't want to pay your bills usually. You don't want to move out and have to clothe yourself and buy a house. You don't want to do all those things. You don't want to have to maybe even do your own laundry or cook your own food. You want your parents to do those things, but you also don't want them telling you what to do. You want to be able to stay out all night. You want to date who you want. You want to have all your devices whenever you want. So there's this dichotomy of, I want you to be in control of my life, but I also hate it when you're in control of my life. And that is a very normal dialectic that teenagers will go through. And as we navigate that with our kids, and as we navigate that with our parents, we graduate into a older, more mature mindset later on if things go well. For Asuelu, he seems to be bouncing back and forth between those two modes, possibly because he went through significant mistreatment or difficulty or chaos when he was 12 or 13, maybe younger. And he vacillates between, do everything for me. You are responsible. You are going to be the parent. I'm going to go play volleyball, and I'm going to be the fun one. And you will take care of the kids, and you will do everything. Or don't tell me what to do. I'm going to do everything my way. He seems to vacillate between those two, instead of what we would hope, where he would say, we're on the same team. And we're both going to parent the kids together, and we're both going to be on the same team on this. That we're both adults here, and we will have conversations where you assert your wants and needs, and I assert mine, and we negotiate them out, and we listen to each other. There doesn't seem to be anything like that in this relationship. Maybe it's happening behind the scenes, but we don't see it. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.